I'm Brad Meltzer, and this is the story behind my stories.
You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
J.T. Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Ford,
Corey Dr. O,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mott,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Charlene Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is
Brad Meltzer.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to Author Stories. I hope you are enjoying the shows as much as I'm enjoying bringing them to you. You know, as always, you can go over to hankgarner.com and click over in the right-hand sidebar and subscribe to the show. You'll never miss an episode. It costs you nothing, and it helps other people find the show. The more people subscribe, the higher we go in the rankings on iTunes and Google Play and Stitcher Radio and YouTube and everywhere we are. And thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. I'd like to thank some sponsors who, due to their generous support of the show, help bring this to you each and every time we bring you the show. From Eamon Ambrose, author of the best-selling sci-fi serial 0 Hour, comes a new novelette, Love and Other Algorithms. When Frank, a personal robot assistant, meets a similar model named Shelley, they are inexplicably linked and form an instant bond. But when outside forces conspire to separate them, Frank must decide how far he will go to save their relationship. However, all is not as it seems, and as Frank searches for Shelley, he learns that they are both part of something much, much bigger. Out now from Amazon, Love and Other Algorithms by Eamon Ambrose. Hey authors, are you looking for a beautiful professional cover for your science fiction or fantasy book? Holly Heisey Designs offers custom illustration and cover design with characters that will put your people center stage, spaceships designed from the ground up, and scenery that makes your world come alive. Visit Holly Heisey Design to book a custom cover or view pre-made ebook covers ready to purchase. Holly is an award-winning illustrator and designer who's done work for the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction, the Future Chronicles anthology series, and USA Today and Amazon.com best-selling authors. Holly will bring your story world to life and get you a cover that will help sell your book. Visit hollyheiseydesign.com for more information on how to book your custom cover design or purchase pre-mades, as well as join the Holly Heisey Design Facebook group for discounts and first dibs at all the new spaceship and fantasy pre-made covers. Find all of this at hollyheiseydesign.com. A Bright Shore, The Eden Chronicles, Book 1 by S.M. Anderson, a military sci-fi political thriller set just a short decade from now in 2031, holding to the concept of individual liberty can get you killed. Western civilization is in collapse, a process led and driven by the world's leading supposed democracies, our own included. What was once the Western world's guiding light of liberty is quickly being replaced by state-sponsored serfdom under the guise of a global economic reset done in the name of the workers. This is an exciting new novel by an exciting new talent, a debut novel, the first in a series from a former CIA operations officer who has decided that his lifelong writing habit, hobby, obsession is more fun than real work. Go pick up a copy today of A Bright Shore, The Eden Chronicles, Book 1 by S.M. Anderson. There's a link to all of our great sponsors in the show notes at hankgarner.com. Stick around at the end of our excellent interview today for an audiobook clip from Richard Gleaves, the Jason Crane series. As always, thanks for listening. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm really excited to bring Brad Meltzer to the show. Brad has a brand new book that's just releasing about the time this episode airs. It's called The Escape Artist, and I'm very excited to talk with Brad about it tonight. So welcome to the show, Brad.
Thank you, my friend.
Yeah, Brad, I begin each show with the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or a storyteller?
It's funny. I didn't ever think I was going to be a writer because I didn't know that was a real job. My family was just, very middle class, and my dad, I was the first in my family to go to a 4-year college. So I always thought you went to high school and a job. I didn't even, I didn't grow up knowing writers or thinking about writers, anything like that. And I'll tell you, my first memory that I can put it to is freshman year. A guy who became my college roommate walked in, and I didn't know him. We weren't freshman roommates, but we wound up later becoming best friends at college. But walked in wearing this will really date me, a jean jacket, right? So it was like late 80s. And on the back of his jacket, he had drawn all these cartoon characters like Opus from, Bloom County and Garfield and Superman and Batman and, Peanuts, Charlie Brown, everyone you can imagine, Calvin and Hobbes. And he said, you have that conversation freshman year with people, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he immediately said, I'm going to be a cartoonist. And I just remember going, what? That's a job? Like, people pay you to do that? And it was the first person that ever said to me, put that idea in my head, you can have the job. But the first moment as a true writer, and again, not that I thought it was a job, is my ninth grade English teacher, Miss Sheila Spicer, who told me when I was in ninth grade and changed my life with 3 words. She said to me, you can write. And I didn't know, I'm like, everyone can write. She said, no, you know what you're doing. And she tried to put me in the honors class. I had some sort of conflict. So she said, here's what I'm going to do. You're going to sit in the corner the entire year, ignore everything I do on the blackboard, ignore every homework assignment I give you, you're going to do the honors work instead. And she was really saying, you're going to thank me later. And sure enough, 10 years later, when my first book came out, I went back to her classroom, I knocked on the door, and she said, can I help you? I said, my name is Brad Meltzer, and I wrote this book, and it's for you. And gave her that copy of the book. She was crying hysterically. She said, I said, why are you crying? She said, I was going to retire this year because I didn't think I was having an impact anymore. Oh. And I said, are you kidding me? I said, you have 30 students. We have 1 teacher. And, sometimes you don't even realize the impact we have on others. And that woman changed my life, but had no idea of her impact. And that's the first kind of like big writing moment, but it wasn't until the cartoonist that I figured out that that it was an actual job.
Well, Brad, in over 300 author interviews that we've done on the show, there seems to always, or almost always, there's a person who intervenes in some seemingly innocuous way that and says just the thing that a kid needs to hear. Sometimes it's a lot of times it's a teacher, sometimes it's a parent, sometimes, and you just never know when that one little piece of encouragement is going to take root and absolutely change somebody's life.
I truly believe that the power that all of us have, the greatest power we all have, is just your own voice for encouragement for other people. That's your power. Right? Think of the person who gave you your first real job. Think of the first person who ever took a chance on you. You got them in your head. That person was a giant in your life. But that's you now. Right? You're on the mountaintop every day, and your words, encouraging words, good job. You have a real knack for that. Those words are your power. And if you don't use that power, time fades and your power fades with it. But every one of us can use that power.
That's right. Your first book that you had published was Well, first off, when did you decide to write your first novel? You went from not even knowing that was a real job to how did you get the motivation to actually set out to do it?
Yeah, so I went to a job in Boston after college. I had some debt to pay off because college was expensive for my family. And a guy in Boston named Eli Siegel said to me, why don't you come work for me? If you love it, you'll stay. And if you hate it, you'll leave with some money in your pocket. I thought that was a good deal. He said, so I moved all my stuff to Boston. I moved everything to Boston. He was going to be my mentor, take me under his wing. And the week I got to Boston, he left the job. And I thought, oh, crap, I've wrecked my life. I thought, that's it. I wrecked my life. It's over. And I did what all of us would do in situations where we think we wrecked our lives. I said, I'm going to write a novel. What everyone would do. And the truth was, I sat down, I wrote my first novel. It got me 24 rejection letters. I always joke there were only 20 publishers. I got 24 rejection letters, and that's true. Some people were writing me twice to make sure I got the point. Right. But I was young and I was stubborn, and I said, if they don't like that book, I'll write another. And if they don't like that book, I'm going to write another. And the week after I got my 23rd and 24th rejection letter, I started the book that became The 10th Justice, and that was my first published work. It was actually my second novel.
And that book changed your life. I think it's safe to say.
Oh my gosh, 100% changed my life. You know, and it was just because as I said, I was just too stubborn to give up. And at the time, what happened when the first book was, that's where I fell in love with writing. I just every day, I still was working full time. I would come home and write at night, and then I'd take off Fridays, but I would work like 5 hour, long hours on Saturdays and Sundays. But every day that I would come home, I would fall more and more in love with talking to these imaginary friends, and realize, wait a minute, this is something I love doing. And everyone always says, it's such a cliche, find what you love to do and find someone to pay you to do it. I didn't know what I loved. And when I started doing this, I said, everyone has one novel in them. I have a year where I'm working at this job, and I know I'm only going to be here a year, so I might as well take a shot. But I fell in love with the process of writing, and Attempt Justice changed my life when it came out. I mean, that book, I didn't even really know what the bestseller list was for the most part. I mean, I'd heard of it, but and then suddenly they said, you're on it. And I was like, what? How? Like, it's still, this is 20 years now since Attempt Justice came out. I was a child when that book came out.
That's insane. Most of the things that you write are thrillers, and it seems like you started writing thrillers. Was that a genre that you read a lot? Like, what made you gravitate toward these tense mysteries and thrillers?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of, when I was growing up, I loved Judy Blume because I thought that was how I was going to figure out women. Like, that, I thought that was like an instructional book. I was like, that's going to help me figure it out. And then the other person who I loved was Agatha Christie. It's just what I loved. I loved mysteries. I remember, reading that book, The Murder at the Vicarage. And to this day, I don't even know what a vicarage is. I don't care. I don't want to know. But I just remember I opened that chapter. I was a young kid, and there was a body, a dead body. And then the most important question was asked, the question that has haunted me for all these years since, which is, who done it? And that's what I liked. But as I will say, I didn't. My first book that I wrote, the one that got all the rejections, was not a thriller. It was just a character study. It was just, two people in college, which is what I knew at the time. And then I went to law school and kind of got more stuff to write about. But as for why it became a thriller, I think I'm always, as every thriller writer is, we're all naturally paranoid. That's what you do when you're a thriller writer, is you imagine, anyone who says they're not paranoid is lying. Right. But I will say that's what I also loved reading. I really did. I still remember reading The Firm. I still remember reading Presumed Innocent. And I just remember being like, whoa, what's this? And those two books just knocked me on my ass. I remember reading them, I think I was probably in college at the time. And just thinking that is something spectacular. So whether it was, just the feeling of that's what I like, or, that's what I wish I could do, whatever it might be, that was certainly the influence.
I think my first introduction to your writing was through the Justice League and Tornado's Path specifically. I think you and I are pretty close to the same age, and I had not read comics in quite a while, but I was a huge comics geek when I was a kid, and the Justice League were my absolute favorite characters and favorite team. And I came upon this book one day, and it just really blew me away. And then from there, I started reading. I think I picked up the 10th Justice and just really fell in love with your work. But tell me how you got to write the Justice League. That is every kid's dream and every, comics nerd, grown up, if you get to write the Justice League.
I was kids.
Yeah.
3 kids. Like, this is my dream, right? I waited my whole, I basically, my friend Judd Winnick, who was the cartoonist that wore that jacket, introduced me to Bob Schreck, who was the editor at DC Comics at the time. And my 4th novel had come out. It was the day the 4th novel came out, The Millionaires. And Kevin Smith, the director, was writing Green Arrow at the time. Yeah. And it was their number one. It was DC's number one superhero book back then. And they knew that Kevin was leaving. And they said if he leave, and they basically said, Bob waited in line. He was the last person in line at my New York book signing. And he said, would you like to write Green Arrow? And I said, I've waited my entire life for someone to ask me that question. and I said, are you serious? Because if you're bullshitting me, I'm really going to be upset. And he said, no, I'm serious. And he explained to me that if Kevin Smith I should say, Kevin Smith, I should say, left Green Arrow, everyone, and we put a new comic writer in, then everyone's going to say, where's Kevin Smith? But they said, if we put you in, someone who no one in comics has ever heard of, and we give them one of our top books, everyone's going to say, well, why'd they give it to him? Why would they take that and give it to him? And everyone's going to go, what's going on here? And so they said, you'll either succeed on a big stage or you'll fail on a big stage. And it's all up to you.
No
and I
pressure.
said, I'll take those odds. And so I knew it was going to be, I was either going to get crucified or it was going to work well. And thankfully, Kevin Smith was just a total gentleman and said to people, I'm going to read this book. And people stayed on and gave me a shot. You know how comics are. You give the next guy a shot. You got one issue, right? Impress me or I'm gone. And luckily people stayed. And then I did Identity Crisis, and that book changed my life. And then Dan DiDio came to me and said, he knew. Well, I didn't even say. He knew what I wanted to do. He knew I always wanted to write the Justice League. And they were relaunching the Justice League with #1, and they said I could pick my own Justice League. And I'm like, I've waited my whole life for someone to tell me that. So that was it.
The Black Lightning has a TV show now, which is blows your mind. And I was thinking the other day, I was like, I remember when Black Lightning really came to the forefront for me, and that was when Brad Meltzer put him in the Justice League.
I appreciate it. They gave us a great tip of the hat because they used the costume that we used in the Justice League in the pilot as his old costume. And that was a costume that I helped design based on Lightning Lad from the Legion of Superheroes, as I tried to redo it so that Lightning Lad forever was influenced by Black Lightning. I was like, wait, if he's looking from the future to the past, then wouldn't that be great? And so I love getting to see that on TV.
Well, after writing comics, you've written a number of thrillers, and you had this really great character in Beecher that was a recurring character in a number of your books. And I know he's not present in the brand new book, but I've wanted to ask you for a while that, a lot of thrillers, you get this central protagonist that has, military training or this paramilitary, and there's a lot of skullduggery that goes on, and the character has all of this, but Beecher was none of that, and I loved him for that. Where did the character of Beecher come from, and do you think we'll ever see him again?
Oh, I hope I'll definitely see Beecher again. Beecher was designed, we always see it, as you just said, whether it's James Bond or Jason Bourne or whoever it might be, we see them as these fully realized superheroes, right? They can, take down the FBI and the CIA and kiss the girl and the sunset falls. And I just was like, we've seen that a million times. And I was like, can I build a character and turn the character into that? Can we see that character before they become the great thing that and watch a character actually grow and evolve? And so Beecher he doesn't know how to throw a punch, he doesn't know how to fire a gun. But what Beecher is he's smarter than anybody. He's smarter than you, and he's smarter than me. And I love the idea that where, there's someone dies and the police come in and they examine and they see, okay, guy got shot in the head. But Beecher comes in and he says, wait a minute, there's a little hole drilled into the door of this room. And he remembers that Abraham Lincoln, on the night he was shot, there was a hole drilled by John Wilkes Booth into the room he was sitting so that he could peek through. And then he sees that there's a pine piece of wood that was right by the door, and John Wilkes Booth actually barred the door using a piece of wood. And so the police see just another shooting, and what Beecher sees, because he has that historical memory as an archivist at the National Archives, he sees a recreation of the greatest murder in U.S. history. And I love the idea that it's just his brain. That's his superpower. And so I love building Beecher from that. I spent a lot of time at the National Archives to build him, and those people were just so kind to me. And someone said to me, that is the nerdiest hero of any series I've ever seen. And I said, and therefore the greatest. Like I said, that's what I want. So I love that, I was like, where else would you want to be but the National Archives amidst all that history?
Yeah, and which is why he's so endearing to us is because he's not the cookie cutter protagonist that we see in every other thriller. He's different. He's like us, but better.
Yeah, no, and he's like me, but better. That's where where does he come from? I mean, every character is me on some level, but he's my nerdy dream self, right? That's my alter ego. That's what we all are. But it was just that belief that like all this historical and superhero and other crap that's in my brain could actually be useful and solve a crime and save the day. I was like, wait, his name is Beecher.
Love it. It's one thing I love about your books is there's always something that I come away from your books having learned, something I didn't know about, something, a little piece of weird history, that seems completely implausible yet completely checks out. What do you, when you get an idea for a new book, do you start with one of these little weird pieces of history and then start kind of thinking out the plot from there? Or, is it kind of a culmination of different things? I guess what I'm asking is, kind of what comes first in this, and how do you start digging up these weird artifacts?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's like the Supreme Court definition of pornography, which is you know it when you see it, right? That's how I feel about ideas. Like, you just know it. You just know it when you see it. I remember being in the National Archives, and I was just doing research because I found the archives interesting. And then they pulled, in fact, maybe here's a better place to start. Years ago, I got called by the Department of Homeland Security to come in and brainstorm different ways that terrorists could attack the United States. And my first thought was, if they're calling me, we have bigger problems than anybody thinks, right? I mean, but I was struck by that, and I was like, why'd they call me? And I traced it back through history, and it traced back to a man named George Washington. And George Washington had his own secret spy ring made up of regular, ordinary citizens. And why? Because everyone knew on the British side who his main military leaders were, but he knew George Washington was smart enough to know no one looks twice at an ordinary person. And I said to my friend in Homeland Security, wouldn't it be cool if you found out that George Washington's spy ring still existed to this very day? And he said to me, what makes you think it doesn't? And I was like, that's a good idea for a book. So you just, on that one, I found about the Culper spy ring that George Washington used to have, and it just gnawed with me. And I tend to do it with the ideas, even in the Escape Artist. I had this detail about Harry Houdini. It's a modern day thriller, but I had heard years ago about this one detail about Harry Houdini I just couldn't shake. And when it's there for like 5 years or more, that's when you really got to do something with it. And that's what happened. And the Escape Artist was built out of that, and researching Dover Air Force Base and going on a USO tour, and just seeing these things that I just never had seen before, and just going, I want to spend time thinking and learning about those. And whatever gets me excited, I just know one thing. I base my career on one theory, which is I'm not that special. And if I find it really damn cool, then there's other people that are like me that are hopefully going to find it equally as cool. And that's the one thing I rely on.
So let's talk about the Escape Artist a little bit. First off, you've got a brand new character in Nola, and I mean, when you open the cover to this book, chapter 1, just knocks you over from the beginning. You talk about, as a writer, dropping someone into the middle of the action. You are hit with a dose of vertigo from the first page. And then, you get into things like magicians. You touched on Houdini earlier, and Dover Air Force Base, and the Army's artist in residence. You've got this real hodgepodge of stuff that weaves together into this crazy story. So, where did Nola come from, and what do magicians have to do with anything? Yeah,
so let's talk about. So the Escape Artist starts with Nola Brown. Nola's dead. The government says she's dead. And her body is brought to Zig, who works putting to rest the government's top secret agents at Dover Air Force Base, and which means he's privy to lots of secrets. Now, he wants to deal with this body because he knows Nola from when she was little. She used to be in Girl Scouts with his daughter. And listen, when someone comes in that you want to take care of that body, show them the final respect, deal with them correctly. And he takes the white sheet and he pulls the white sheet down to deal with the body. And he remembers when they were Girl Scouts that Nola had a soda can exploded in a campfire, and it kind of cut off the top of her ear. So as he rolls down the white sheet to look at the body, he sees, though, that her ear is perfectly intact. And confused, he runs fingerprints, and he quickly realizes this isn't Nola. And he opens up the body, and inside the body is a note that says, Nola, you were right. Keep running. And that's the chapter 1 of The Escape Artist. And he knows right there in that moment, oh my gosh, Nola's out there. Someone's after her. What's happening? And that came to me because I was just obsessed with, I went on a USO tour many years ago. They take 6 thriller writers every few years to go entertain the troops. And I had gone to the Middle East and heard about Dover and realized, this is a building where they bring all these bodies of all these amazing people. So the 9/11 victims from the Pentagon's bodies were taken there. The space shuttle, when it went down, the bodies went there. The victims of the USS Cole, and then, of course, every secret agent that we have, whether it's CIA or someone abroad, they were all brought there too. So it's a building full of secrets, a building full of mysteries. And I thought, how could I not learn about that? And I just became obsessed with it. And so I started building The Escape Artist with that, and then plus the detail, as you said, with magicians, the book opens up, and this is actually what I love is this is truly the very first page of The Escape Artist. And it opens with this. It says, in 1898, John Elbert Wilkie, a friend of Harry Houdini, was put in charge of the United States Secret Service. Wilkie was a fan of Houdini and did his own tricks himself. It is the only time in history that a magician was in control of the Secret Service. And man, I friggin' love that detail. And I was like, how do I use that old past detail today? And I just realized I got it. And when we were recording the episode of Lost History, we were recording the very first episode, and we were in a military base in Virginia. And I went to this museum that they had on base, and they had all these paintings there. They had Adolf Hitler's paintings. They had paintings from military members. And I was like, why does the U.S. government have all this art? Why do they even own this art? And they took me to what's called the artist in residence. It's someone in the Army. We've, since World War I, had someone in the Army who literally paints of all things, disasters as they happen. So, storming the beaches in Normandy, someone's painting. I know we have photographers in Vietnam, but they're still painting, because even though video and photographs can, show you what happened, what a painting does is it tells a story. And I just love the idea that all these men were running in with guns, and the artist in residence actually was a woman. And they said that everyone's running in with guns, and here comes this artist in residence who's running to the same exact spot, the same moment of conflict, but she's got colored pencils in her pockets. And I thought, that is the craziest person I can think of. That is just that you must be insane to do such a thing. And that's where I got Nola from. And Nola became just one of my favorite creations I've ever done. She's a spectacularly lethal character who just is missing a few key parts and broken and damaged. But like all of us, we're all broken and damaged. And Nola has kind of taught me how to fight back.
Speaking of the TV show, you've done 2 TV shows for history, Brad Meltzer's Decoded and Lost History. A lot of these interesting historical tidbits wind up in your books, and a lot of times we'll have an occurrence, and there's kind of legend that's built around it. And when you start peeling back the layers, sometimes it's not as kind of sexy as the conspiracy theories and the legends have built up to be. Have you ever been researching something and it is absolutely every bit as crazy as the legends are, and you're just thinking, nobody would ever believe this. I can't even use this in a book. It's just too crazy.
Oh yeah, I mean, listen, all the time. I mean, that Houdini one was one that I was like, that's just so crazy. I need to do it. The Culper ring for George Washington was one. The Lincoln assassination, which I used in a book, is another one. They're just crazy upon crazy what has happened. And, I agree with you. Everything can't be a conspiracy. It just can't be. It's just not possible. The government's not even that organized to do the good things wrong. It can't do all the bad things right. But there are some crazy things that have happened through history. They're not all, maniacal and people stroking their cats on their, on their Game of Thrones. But there are some amazing moments, and those are the moments I grab. I mean, I really do. I mean, we found one, what John Wilkes Booth, when he shot Abraham Lincoln, had all these pictures of his girlfriends in his wallet, and what else he was carrying in his wallet is just awesome. And I was like, I'm using that. I'm going to use that in a book. It's so crazy. And of course, nothing beats the crazy than JFK. I mean, that was just, crazy, and then a second scoop of crazy, and then a third scoop of crazy. And the details, listen, everything can't be the end of the universe, but there are real important questions that need to be answered, right? I mean, what is Jack Ruby doing walking through a police station, and never gets stopped by anyone? Lee Harvey Oswald spends all that time in Russia. He's a former Marine, and nobody says a word at the height of the Cold War. Nobody knows anything. Like, those are good questions that need to be answered. Those are the fair ones. I mean, obviously not that every single person there had a gun and all of them shot him at once, but there are fair questions that need to be answered by history. And to me, that's the fun of getting to research this stuff, is to try and figure it out for myself. I don't, I'm selfish about it. I want it for me.
Right. But Bohemian Grove is still weird, though, right?
Oh, come on, man. They do this great chant under a super duper, 3-foot story owl. I'll tell you the story is when our team on Dakota got arrested at Bohemian Grove, and they were on the West Coast in California. I was on the East Coast where I live, and the phone rang late at night, and I knew if it was ringing that late, I knew we were filming. That I was like, oh, we got trouble. And they said to me, it's gonna be, don't worry, we'll be fine. It's a late night, we're done. And the phone rang, and they said, we got bad news. The team got arrested. And I immediately said, did you get it on tape? And they said, don't worry, Brad, everyone's okay. And I said, I meant, is everyone okay? And did you get it on tape? So.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. Brad, the new book is, well, first off, congratulations on 20 years. That's an amazing accomplishment. What have you learned in the course of this dozen or so books, that you think makes you a better writer today than when you started 20 years ago?
That's a good question. I mean, I think for me, people always say, oh, I love, this one's first book. You always love the first book. And the reason I think you love people's first books is because the author really, truthfully, doesn't know what they're doing yet. It's all instinct. They don't know to hide themselves. They don't know to protect themselves. They're just, if they feel it, they put it on the page. It's as pure a feeling as possible. And once your book comes out, I think as writers, we put up these walls because you get some bad reviews and you get some good reviews, and you start thinking, hey, how can I get more of those? And you start editing yourself. You start thinking of, maybe I shouldn't do that. Or maybe I did have a character that was too this, that, or the other thing. I don't want to do that again. And suddenly you're not the only one with a hand on the steering wheel anymore. You're thinking of other people. And the process gets kind of diluted, whether you like it or not. As hard as we all are trying to do our best to tell our story. But once you have the whole world respond, you can't help but change yourself a little. And I think for me, it's my long-winded way of saying the one thing I hope I've learned, or at least that I wish I knew, is just to really go back and be honest and let yourself be out there. If you look at my first interviews that I did in those first maybe 5 years, anything you asked me, everything was great. Everything's terrific. So lucky to be here. So thankful. It was like giving baseball quotes from Bull Durham. Everything's terrific. I'll take it one day at a time. Everything's terrific. And I was just terrified to say anything was wrong because I was worried if I did, it would somehow be thankless for this amazing job that I was so blessed to have. And then I realized somewhere along the way that life is friggin' hard, and it's hard for all of us. And it's okay to say that crap went wrong, or this went wrong in my family, or man, I was devastated when my mother passed away, or when my dad passed away, or whatever it was that was going on in my life. And that's what we put on Facebook and Twitter, is not showing all the good things that are amazing, but man, this crap is hard too. And I think and hope I've learned, I don't know if I'm a better writer, but I think I'm a more honest one. I really do open myself up to that. And when I went to do The Escape Artist, I think the reason it's gotten the reviews that it's so far gotten, and the reason people are reacting to it, is because I just said, I don't care anymore. I'm going to put my thing out there. And I think what people are reacting to is my own, I really looked back and said, I love a lot of the books I've written, but some of them were too plot heavy. And what were the early ones? Why were they better? And I was like, because they were character driven. There's no better plot than a good character. And so I just went back to that. I was like, I'm not starting this book until I have these characters. I'm not. And I think that's where Nola came from. I hope that's where Zig came from. And I think it's why, if anything, The Escape Artist, if I hope it hums, it's because of that alone.
Excellent. Well, Brad, we're going to send everybody to pick up a copy of The Escape Artist. It's an amazing book. You've done an incredible job, and you've created new characters for us to love. So while I hope you get back to Beecher one day, I'm really excited to see where these characters go as well. Thank you so much for taking time to come on the show today.
Thank you, and thanks for supporting all the writers who you do support. And anyone else listening out there, let me end with this. I got 24 rejection letters. I got 24 people who told me I should give it up, and I don't look back on the experience and say, well, I was right and they were wrong and ha-ha on them. But it just means life is subjective, right? And whatever it is you're writing, if you're listening to this podcast, it's because you want to learn about the craft of it. And to me, don't let anyone tell you no. Don't let anyone tell you no. Just keep going and keep going and keep going.
Excellent advice. Thanks, Brad. Thanks for coming on the show.
Anytime. And anyone who has their first book come out, you send me a message on Twitter. I will promote it for you. I always do. For any new writer that's promoting their first book, I'm there. I want to help them. Thanks again.
Thanks for listening to the Author Stories podcast. For more great author interviews like this one, go to hankgarner.com and dig through the archives. There's something there I know you'll love. Now stay tuned for a special audio clip from Richard Gleaves' The Jason Crane series.
Mather steepled his hands. You asked to join us once? Hedwig leaned forward, eagerly. The appointed. Does that appeal? Yes. Do you even know what we do? My grandmother used to say that you control the world. That's not far off. But why? To what end? I don't know. Power? Pour me a bourbon. Mather reached into his briefcase and produced a file folder. I want to tell you one story. Have you ever heard of Centralia, Pennsylvania? No. He produced a photo for Hedwig's inspection. Spring of 1962. A pretty little town, wasn't it? Whitewash and ticky-tacky, pastel housewives and perfect lawns. A mining community, mostly. Coal. He turned over a second photo. A lovely young woman. There was a single witch in Centralia named Anna Lively. Anna had a green thumb. She could make her garden grow, whisper to a flower, and send it shooting from the ground like that. Just lovely. But she was discovered. That spring, a boy named Bobby Avery received a Bell & Howell Zoomatic movie camera for his 11th birthday. Bobby amused himself by filming his neighbors, sometimes without their knowledge, through windows and over garden fences. 12 seconds of film. Just a girl and her garden patch and one swiftly blooming rose. It killed the town. Bobby showed it to his friends. Children believe readily. Bobby was the first to die. Parents looked into it, watched the film themselves, and they began to die. Anna disappeared. Perhaps they attacked her. Perhaps she escaped. But even in her absence, knowledge of a true witch was running wild through the population, as if Anna had beckoned it herself to grow verdant and spread. The great curse had killed 64 Centralians by the 1st of June. The footage was offered to a national news organization. That was the precipice. It might have been shown in prime time, between Leave It to Beaver and My Three Sons. We came very close to another worldwide calamity, but we were fortunate. One of our own was in place at the network. He alerted his superiors, and they ended the situation. Do you know how? I'm afraid to ask. Mather laid down another photo. This is Centralia today. It was an aerial view of a forest. Endless trees and underbrush cut through by lanes of pavement. Just a maze of cracking asphalt, like the foundations of Sodom, ripped bare by the wrath of God. Only a cemetery remained, on a hill overlooking the former town. A white marble angel stood among the graves, grieving for the ruins below, like Lot's wife, turned to salt. You destroyed the whole town? Not I. This was well before my time. But, yes. Just as you'd cauterize a wound to stop a patient from bleeding to death. We blamed it on an uncontrollable mine fire, deep below the earth. We actually set the coal burning in case someone investigated. It burns today. Touch any of those streets and you'll find them hot, the asphalt melting as if the town sat just above perdition. It's not something we're proud of, but it was necessary to save the world. Centralia, Pennsylvania, and everyone who'd seen that film had to be sacrificed. Mather collected the photos. So, that is why the appointed exist, and that is what we do. Still want to join?